Olivia, are you starting to let people in from the waiting room?
I will start that in just in about 30 seconds.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, we have over 60 people have already joined us. We're just going to give it one more minute and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we should begin. Well, welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know we have people joining us from all over the world, so thank you for being here today. I'm Bridget Johnson, and I'm ChIPs Director of Business Development and Sponsorships. And I am absolutely thrilled that today's accelerator is being hosted by Clarivate. And they're here to talk a little bit about how AI is impacting the IP legal world as a work tool. I just want to share with you three quick housekeeping tips. Number one, if you have a question for Clarivate, please put that question on the Q&A. There's a button on the bottom of your screen. Just click on that button, put your question in, and Clarivate will be answering those questions towards the end of the event. Number two, we are recording this and we'll be posting it on our website, the ChIPs website, and in our community platform. So if you'd like to go back and review it or share it, you can find it there. Number three, if your organization is interested in hosting an accelerator, please reach out to me. I will put my contact information in the chat so you can easily access me. So now I am thrilled to turn this over to Gloria and the Clarivate team. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget, and hello everyone. Welcome to today's webinar that's called The Evolution of AI in IP, which dives into how AI is reshaping the IP landscape, not just as a future concept, but as a practical tool already embedded in daily workflows. We will walk you through findings from Clarivate's 2025 AI in IP survey, exploring how AI is being used, where it's delivering real value, what's slowing broader adoption, and best practices for success. Whether you lead an IP function or advise on legal tech strategy, this session will help you move from experimentation to true transformation. But first, a little bit about myself. So I'm Gloria Sweeney. I'm a senior business solution consultant at Clarivate and the co-author of the Evolution of AI in IP report of this year. I specialize in how IP intelligence flows across organizations and bring deep expertise in risk management and privacy frameworks from previous jobs I've had. And before joining Clarivate in 2022, I worked across several SaaS companies in IP as well as data governance. Over to you, Annie.
Hi, everybody. I'm Annie Mitchell, and I'm also a senior business solution consultant at Clarivate and co-author of The Evolution of AI and IP, Adoption, Impact and Readiness. I advise corporate and law firm clients on transforming their IP operations and spanning process, people, technology and strategy. And I also came to Clarivate in 2022 After working as the Global IP Operations Coordinator at a large luxury brand, where I was supporting trademark management and I helped to shape operations and policy. Back to you, Gloria.
Yeah, and we are both part of Clarivate's IP business solution consulting team. So we support customers in optimizing their IP processes, delivering return of investment of our products and services, as well as leading change management projects. And our first-hand experience across corporate and law firm teams helped interpret the survey results and also write this report. Next slide, please. So why is benchmarking AI in IP important now? We've seen over the past 2 years that there has been an extraordinary evolution in artificial intelligence technologies, especially in the space of generative AI. So from the launch of ChatGPT to the passing of the EU AI Act, the pace of change has really been remarkable in the last 2 years. And today we'll explore what this means for IP teams and why now is the perfect time for a pulse check. So AI maturity is really accelerating across industries, and what was experimental maybe 2 years ago is now embedded in enterprise workflows. So additionally, regulatory frameworks are really catching up, and last year's EU AI Act is a prime example for that. And in my opinion, I think these regulations are just going to increase and expand in the years to come. And another sort of development that we have noticed is that generative AI has also become way more normalized. I know in my early days when I worked at SaaS companies, when you started to talk about AI with customers, a lot of people were always a bit, especially IP professionals, a bit taken back and didn't really think, you know, it has a place maybe in IP processes, but this has really changed now since the launch of generative AI technologies. So it's really not longer a novelty anymore, but it's become part of daily operations for many organizations. So with these shifts, how do IP teams really measure their own readiness and adoption compared to peers? This is a question we are really asked a lot of times when we do our consulting projects in our team. So we really have seen that IP teams today need benchmarks. Without them, it's really hard to know for them if they're ahead, behind, or on par with industry standards. So comfort levels, adoption rates, and integration strategies vary widely. It's really a whole spectrum when we speak to our customers, from not having adopted any AI yet to having many different technologies embedded in many different workflows already. So understanding where you are in that sort of spectrum really helps to do these informed decisions about how to progress further in your AI adoption journey. So actually 2 years ago, Clarivate already had conducted a survey gathering insights into this. So this was in 2023, so just before the launch of ChatGPT actually. So we conducted this with a 2-year gap, and it tracked real change in terms of sentiment, capability, and also integration over time. So and it's been 2 years since this last report, and as I already mentioned, the technologies have really evolved rapidly since then. So our goal was to understand how IP teams are adapting and also compare their comfort levels across the industry over that time frame. So as AI has really not become something of an optional question anymore, and has more become a sort of strategic question on whether you want to use it or not. Knowing where you stand has become really critical, and also professionals start to feel the pressure now to stay ahead of regulatory changes, like mentioned before, of the EU AI Act, but also regulatory changes to come, but also, of course, the technological shifts that we've been seeing in the last few years. And obviously there will be more changes coming in the next few years. Next slide, please. So A little bit about the methodology of this year's 2025 survey. So as you can see, we reached out to almost 120,000 IP professionals, and of those, 422 actually fully completed the survey and sent it back to us. The survey included questions about their demographics, sentiment questions such as comfort levels with AI technologies and their past experience using and trialing different AI technologies and tools. Also, which use cases, for instance, they have implemented AI in already, what the satisfaction was with it at the moment, what the roadblocks are, as well as any other challenges that they might have experienced. And also another really important question was, what is the anticipated impact on their roles adopting these technologies more and more? And we also asked an open response question on the topic. So as you can see on the right-hand side, out of those aforementioned 422 respondents, around a third were attorneys, so both corporate and in law firm environments. A quarter were in executive roles, so in law firms, that's, for instance, partners. 1 in 10 were working in the R&D function, actually, rather than an IP role. And there was a split of around a quarter working in law firms, whilst 3/4 work in corporate organizations. In terms of the geographic distribution, almost half were from Europe, roughly a quarter from North America, a fifth from the Asia Pacific region, and 8% from the MENA region. And you can see that also the split between patents only was around 55%, 27% worked both in patents and trademarks, and only 16% worked with trademarks only. So comparing the results from the two surveys, 2023 and 2025, allowed us to establish changes that occurred in the last 2 years and gave us real insights into how AI technologies are perceived now in contrast to then, and what customers' adoption journey has been like. So depending on those more sentiment questions that we've been asking, we generated scores that were given by the respondents, normally on a scale from 1 to 10. And those scores, we grouped them into 3 categories. So promoters, passives, and detractors. And using that calculation formula is something that is called a net promoter score, also shortened to NPS. And those scores then allowed us to compare the results from 2023 to 2025. Now that we've grounded ourselves a little bit into how this research was conducted and why maybe this year's data set looks slightly different to last time we did this, we can shift into what everyone really wants to know. So what did we uncover? So Annie's going to walk us through key findings and what the data tells us about where the market is heading. Over to you, Annie.
Thanks very much, Gloria. So yeah, let's talk about what we uncovered. Next slide, please. So when we look across the 2025 data set, we have 5 findings that really stand out. So these are the themes that we saw consistently across roles, industries, and geographies, and they help to frame the rest of our conversation today. Firstly, AI is now embedded in most IP teams and functions, with 85% of respondents using AI in their IP workflows. Confidence is growing with experience, as we found the likelihood of being a promoter of AI increased as the use of AI in IP workflows increased, which I'll cover in a bit more detail later on. Comfort levels are also rising, albeit unevenly. So comfort with AI did increase overall, but we break the results out by role type, and there are some differences there. Use cases are maturing and diversifying, so we see a shift in the tasks that IP professionals are using AI for. And lastly, organizational governance is the foundation for scale and longevity. What I mean by this is that for many, the pace of innovation is actually faster than the pace of organizational readiness. So IP professionals are meeting certain roadblocks, which again, we'll give some more detail on later. And successful implementation really requires structured onboarding and change management. So I'll go into a bit more detail on the next slide. Thank you very much. 2023 to 2025, what has changed since we published the original report? Adoption has grown, so only 15% now say that they're not using AI at all. And as I mentioned, 85% use AI in their IP workflows. And this is compared to 57% in 2023. Comfort levels have improved with an increase of 21 points on the Net Promoter Score. And this is a notable shift from 2023, where discomfort really was quite widespread. Although in 2025, attorneys do remain cautious, which we feel reflects their responsibilities around liability, client obligations, etc. Trust remains conditional, as accuracy, reliability, and governance remain the top concerns in 2025 when it comes to implementing AI. And lastly, use cases have matured, as respondents are increasingly applying AI to strategic tasks like competitive intelligence and patentability research. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Jess. Thank you. So let's have a look at the adoption trends from 2023 to 2025. The benefits of AI adoption in IP workflows today are clearer than they were previously because they're based on more experience with purpose-built AI tools. So respondents to the 2025 survey continue to prioritise faster research at 60%, automation of manual tasks at 51%, greater productivity at 44%, and more time for high-value work at 43%. The perceived benefits since the original survey have not changed very much, but they have actually decreased. And we think it's likely that this is because IP professionals have a bit more realistic view and expectation on what AI technologies can do for them. So we feel that IP professionals really are now developing a more practical view of benefits as AI goes from a vision to more of a reality. So let's understand these shifts more fully. It's important to see how the different roles experience AI. Attorneys, R&D teams, executives, and law firms all view and risk opportunity through very different lenses. Gloria, over to you to discuss how roles shape perspectives on AI and IP.
Thanks, Annie. So next slide, please. And let's start with the corporate IP attorneys and R&D professionals, two groups that show very different comfort levels with AI and for very different reasons. So let's start with the R&D professionals. So they, of course, tend to be most receptive to AI due to their familiarity with computational tools normally, and of course, the culture of experimentation and trial and error. So they often are early adopters for a range of technologies, including AI, and they obviously use it for intelligence gathering, research, data analysis, and have these more developed use cases rather than a blanket adoption. And their direct and diversified experience is driving, of course, that comfort and normalization in that community. And their focus for leveraging AI is also to support innovation more than legal protection or anything like that. And so their workflows tend to be more exploratory and data-driven. And therefore, they often see AI as a productivity multiplier and a time saver for high-value work. And this, of course, aligns with the mentioned data-driven work styles that they have. Next slide, please. So when it comes to corporate IP attorneys, the picture is a little different. Their confidence in AI is rising, according to our results, but their adoption also still remains cautious due to the nature of their work being of higher liability, higher personal responsibility, and also evidentiary concerns of the results that are being generated. So We've seen that recently the AI adoption has been increasingly targeted, so deployed for tasks that actually align with workflow efficiency and automated or semi-automated workflows, reflected in role-specific needs, and also, their needs for decreased risk tolerance. So the most common use cases for them are around patent and trademark prosecution, such as office action responses, as well as patent and trademark searches, and also more recently patent drafting. So for them, AI functions really as a facilitative layer that can enhance their productivity, automate tasks, reduce errors, and ultimately then also free time up for the higher value work that requires their attorney judgment. So another really interesting point that we've seen with them is also an increased adoption for them on what we call general purpose platforms, so such as ChatGPT and Microsoft Copilot. And in our opinion, this difference really highlights that the attorney's needs for support in correspondence, content understanding and writing, rather than the analysis of quantitative data, which AI has been supporting for much longer in the R&D community already, has really, well, could be a reason why we see this stark difference of using these more generic tools. But this, on the other hand, then really illustrates that this user group has a need for AI, but those AI technologies need to meet specific requirements according to their IP-specific workflows. We've seen this in legal tech now as well, and in the wider legal tech space, of course, tools for contract drafting and contract management. However, that doesn't normally or always translate into the IP-specific work, where, of course, a lot of the nature of that work is, writing an obscure language or very complex documents that need to be understood by the technology. So there's still a gap for these purpose-built technologies for the IP use cases, and therefore there is quite a range in sort of their adoption for that. But next slide, please. Let's also have a look at the executives. So there has been a rapid increase in their confidence since 2023 in comparing the results, and many have now embedded AI as a layer into their organizational strategy. So we've seen customers, that have AI initiatives, etc., on a company-wide level. And for executives, of course, the focus on these technologies is to gain better oversight, have better control and governance, and also just scale the return of investment on these AI technologies across teams. So that enthusiasm for it, for the promise it might bring, does not always translate into the immediate practical adoption. So the organizational uptake can actually lag behind those executive expectations. That's what we see when we speak to a lot of customers, but also the open response questions brought that to light a little bit. And also the value, of course, for AI for decision-making support, strategic insight and efficiency at the organization level, again, can quite vary between different industry sectors. So next slide, please. In contrast, if we look at outside counsels or attorneys in law firms, this can be even more so different. So they continue to be even more cautious than in comparison to the IP attorneys in corporate environments. And their adoption is filtered even more through risk, compliance, and client obligations. And they, of course, therefore prioritize reliability, defensibility, and ethical considerations, and focus on minimizing errors and maintaining quality in their high stakes works. And they are really the group that see AI as a complement to human expertise rather than replacements. And those working in law firms also show a lower enthusiasm actually for automation. We saw 12% below average, and also lower enthusiasm for faster research, 10% below average, because they need to balance the efficiency, on the other hand, with billable models and client trust, and they don't want to run into a false economy of their business model, essentially. So overall, our takeaways are that examining how roles and organization types differ that can affect views on AI, and it reveals that the benefits of AI are really not that universal, and uniform adoption across the IP ecosystem is not a realistic aspiration. It just doesn't really exist, as such, in our opinion. So the incentives really sit along a spectrum, and if we split the spectrum down, it's that executives emphasize strategy, attorneys prioritize liability, and corporates lean towards efficiency while still mindful of risk. So they, sort of the in between. And those working in law firms balance client confidence against the economics of their practice. So Annie, with that, we understand how different roles experience AI, but the next question is, how can we build trust in AI? So what drives professionals from skepticism to confidence in these tools? And you've seen firsthand how teams' attitudes shift once AI is embedded. And maybe can you share your perspective on how experience shapes confidence?
Sure, yeah, next slide, please. So what's really interesting is that once AI proves itself across multiple workflows, this demonstrates that consistent, repeatable outcomes build trust rather than just exposure. So the data that you can see here on screen is very fascinating because it shows dramatic changes when AI is used in 3 or more workflows. We can see with corporates, advocates increase from 14% when AI is not used in any workflows to 53% when it's used in 3 or more workflows, and detractors fell from 70% to only 8%. The effect here is pronounced in law firms where skepticism dominates among non-users. So promoters rose from 0% to 52%, and detractors dropped from 68% to 29%. We really feel that this change signals increasing operational confidence and a more balanced perception of AI-related risks as familiarity and performance improve. So when AI tools consistently deliver results across connected tasks, respondents can view risk as measurable rather than abstract. In other words, consistent performance makes risk feel concrete and controllable instead of uncertain and theoretical. So confidence stems not only from hands-on experience and individual pilots, but also from clear evidence that AI systems can actually strengthen rather than undermine quality and control. And as you can see here, each new application of AI reinforces the idea that these tools can produce practical results without compromising integrity or professional standards. Next slide, please. So the importance of building trust, and we find that early trials of AI technologies alone just isn't enough. Trust in AI capability grows when consistent value is demonstrated across workflows, as I've just demonstrated. And structured integration across several key workflows is critical to drive confidence. So teams can start to trust AI when they see measurable benefits like improved quality, reduced errors, and better workflow efficiency. And once AI tools have demonstrated consistency across interconnected tasks, respondents begin to see risk as more quantifiable. And as one survey said, as Gloria mentioned, we had an open text question. If extra work associated with second guessing and checking AI tools causes more work than simply not using the AI tool, then it has little value. The key point really here is that trust is not static. It has to be actively maintained. The survey shows that confidence holds when AI is embedded and repeatable and measurable and paired with governance frameworks. What do I mean by governance frameworks? Well, it's the blueprint for decision making. So roles and responsibilities, who's making decisions, who's approving, who's monitoring, policies and standards, what roles must be followed, processes, are they documented, controls and reporting, how is compliance and performance tracked? And then continuous monitoring ensures that outputs remain reliable and defensible, especially as workflows and regulations evolve. So you might wonder how this could be monitored, and for example, performing a health check on your technology stack to see how all your stakeholders are using AI tools, how do they benefit or not, rewriting the processes to make sure that they're used in a consistent way, performing an assessment to see what the quantifiable return on investment has been, so time saved if that's what your challenge was, and ensuring that there's a representative responsible to keep on top of AI regulations. Also ensuring a valid assessment is made for the requirement of the AI tool before purchasing, as it's not a one-size-fits-all technology. So Gloria, now that we understand how we can build trust, the next challenge is scaling AI adoption across organizations. What do you think the survey results tell us about what's slowing teams down when it comes to AI adoption?
That's a great question, Annie. Adoption doesn't always scale because initial enthusiasm meets the pain points. So frustrations during implementation is what we mainly mean by that, and also roadblocks, so infrastructural barriers that stall or can stall adoption. So the biggest pain points that were reported were that AI tools didn't work as expected. So that's what 41% stated, and that the quality of the output, such as search results, etc., just didn't meet their expectations. So that was reported by 27%. And I think it's important to note here that adoption is not necessarily being rejected by professionals, but it just needs to be recalibrated to meet the high standards of their reliability. So, all these points you've just mentioned could really help with overcoming those pain points. And we also think that this might be likely due to, in part, because performance is fragmented. And what we mean by that is, AI technologies cannot cover end-to-end workflows without any human intervention or oversight. And that really brings us to the next point as well, where, AI is actually not necessarily easily identifiable by everyone, or, understood of, how it really works in the background. It is not necessarily clearly defined. And we see, of course, a whole range of tools in varied stages of maturity on how they use AI technologies. And that includes the general purpose platforms that currently, of course, dominate because of their easy accessibility. It's been promoted by those software companies to have sort of a company-wide access to it. But of course, their usage is often not clearly stated or marked, or even transparently defined. How and when they should be used for which tasks. And another sort of point I think we should make here as well about adoption is that AI is being used as a wide umbrella term. So it includes numerous technologies. Some of them, like we mentioned before, have been used for years, especially by the R&D community. And therefore, it's really difficult to establish a clear benchmark for successful AI adoption, but rather the outcome of it. So which processes can be automated or semi-automated. And, this is often sort of the desired outcome that we see when we speak to customers. Next slide, please. So just to give an overview of also roadblocks, so those barriers we've mentioned, the top one here is really the transparency we've mentioned before. So these bring concerns of data privacy, professional liability, and compliance. Is often called the black box problem when it comes to these technologies. And that's what actually 58% stated. Also, insufficient training, budget pressures. We know these AI technologies are not necessarily cheap, and also security readiness. So the whole cybersecurity infrastructure. This is again something, just apart from the professional liability, you need to ensure that those AI technologies, which are often bought in from third-party vendors have actually the right cybersecurity frameworks that are being continuously monitored. And interestingly enough, we only saw 14% that said that, the roadblock was a lack of leadership. So that has been one of the most notable improvements from in comparison to the 2023 survey. So Annie, so the numbers really show that adoption challenges aren't about enthusiasm, but they are really about alignment and readiness. So what are you seeing in practice when teams hit these barriers?
Thanks, Gloria. Yeah, next slide, please. So sort of common misconceptions that we tend to hear when we're speaking with the wide IP community is that adoption failure is due to executive resistance, as you've just said. And actually, it's more often practitioner level readiness and training and workflow alignment that matter the most. So adoption readiness really is a wide spectrum, and not all organisations are at the same point in their journey, and that's absolutely okay. We can also see that persuading decision makers is seen to be a big hurdle, whereas actually from the survey results, training, budget and concerns around data privacy are in fact much bigger factors. And I mean, lastly, but very importantly, AI alone will solve your workflow challenges. I mean, there is not, unfortunately, an AI magic wand that we can wave to fix challenges. And as you heard, like 41% felt that AI tools are not generating results as they expected. And maybe this is due to the fact that the requirement is for sort of integrated workflows, clean data setups, active change management, change rollout, and also technical, cultural and institutional barriers that are real and must be addressed to enable success. So unfortunately, there's no sort of plug and play when it comes to AI. It really does take a well thought out assessment about what is required, and it's not a one size fits all. Importantly, also transparency matters. So how results are produced really does matter as much as the results themselves. As Gloria mentioned, the black box problem. So if it's hard to explain why AI made a certain decision, or you can't verify fairness and ethics, and if you can't understand the decision-making process, then how can you trust or regulate the decision? So, we really feel that deliberate role-aligned deployment with governance, training, measurable outcomes is what will turn AI from disruption to utility. So now that we understand the hurdles and some common misconception, let's move on to some practical steps that teams can take to embed AI successfully and sustainably. Next slide, please. So when we think about best practices for AI and IP, there are a few core principles that are supported by both the survey data and the interactions that we have directly with various IP teams. And this is that AI is really no longer a nice to have, but it's rather a strategic enabler. So people are kind of shifting from AI for low risk automation to AI's strategic capability supporting multiple IP functions. Professionals are really no longer debating legitimacy, they're engaging with clearer expectations and higher standards. So readiness depends on more than just adoption. Sustainable AI requires use case specific validation across teams and roles, and scalability depends on consistent accuracy across workflows, technical infrastructure that will support semi-autonomous workflows, and governance that can withstand regulatory evolution. And here on screen, you can see what we can sort of call our pillars of organizational AI readiness. Technical safeguards. I'm sure I'm not telling you anything new with this, but transparent data sources, strong privacy controls, audit trails for defensibility is all really, really important. Role-specific enablement, so making sure tailored workflows are required for attorneys, analysts, executives, operations. Validated scalability. AI has to demonstrate measurable and repeatable value across multiple workflows. And lastly, vendor accountability. Is your vendor providing you with transparent methodologies, assistance with structured rollout, and training aligned with professional standards? So it's really clear the data that organizations, they're not struggling because of a lack of interest, which is great, or a lack of leadership support, but it's because scaling AI takes structure, governance, and change management. Gloria, I know, like myself, you've seen this up close. Can you walk us through what readiness looks like in the day-to-day reality of IP teams?
Yeah, sure, definitely, Annie. Next slide, please. So, yeah, one of the key challenges I see is teams equating adoption with readiness. So, in terms of best practice, we see readiness equals governance, enablement, accountability, as kind of explained just earlier by Annie. But yeah, AI readiness is not the same as AI adoption. It's rather the first step to successful adoption. So, the sustainable AI requires these guardrails to monitor the performance, to do the risk assessment, and to have these clear boundaries between human versus machine decision-making processes. And what we really mean by that also, I think, or what we often see with customers is that what we mean by readiness for AI is having verified and validated data and a robust data infrastructure in the first place, because I'm sure most of you are aware that these AI models, if rubbish data goes in, rubbish data or results come out. So this is often what we see when especially these AI models should now be used for a lot of internal data. But another point we wanted to make here is also that change management is the difference between the programs that plateau versus scale. It is a paradigm shift in how we're working, and this report has also identified really that this is the key differentiator between organizations that have successfully adopted AI and the ones that haven't. So teams with governance frameworks, clear training programs, and a structured rollout where there's a one step at a time sort of approach rather than trying to do everything at once, are the teams that successfully have embedded AI into multiple workflows in their everyday work. So the semi-autonomous workflows, of course, have been emerging, but ultimately we think there needs to be a balanced approach. So accountability must remain with humans at the end, especially, of course, since IP tasks are of such sensitive nature. So what that means is that, it should really raise the questions as, when should AI act? When humans must intervene to ensure that defensibility, as Annie has mentioned, and these shouldn't really be barriers to progress, but they are the conditions that make the progress sustainable. And of course, I think going forward, what we anticipate is that hopefully more vendors of AI technologies become more transparent, and so you can really demand that reliable output quality and how these technologies work. And at the end of the day, of course, we aim to evaluate, or vendors should aim to elevate professional judgment and not build technologies that try to replace that, because that would not go in line with that balanced approach. So with that, I think we've just about covered and contextualized all of the highlights of the 2025 report. But before we start the audience Q&A, I thought we could do a quick roundup of our final thoughts. So Annie, if you had to highlight anything that IP professionals should take away from this research to guide their AI adoption journey in their IP teams, what do you think it would be?
Yeah, good question. I think I'd have to say it's confidence growing when AI is embedded across multiple workflows. The fact that we see an increase in leadership support since 2023 is great, but it's just not enough on its own. So I think the focus really needs to be on practical rollout, focus on governance and change management, and then metrics to scale adoption. So not that simple pilot study, but ensuring that you've got AI embedded in multiple workflows. Where applicable, make the assessment first, ask your vendors to help you with the initial assessment of where best AI should be embedded into your workflows for the most efficient outcomes. So I think, yeah, measurable value, repeatable results, these will all create sustainable adoption. There's a lot here for teams to keep in mind. Thank you everyone for listening. It's not least because role-specific insights matter. R&D executives and attorneys all adopt AI differently. But above all, I think I'd encourage you to view AI as elevating quality and strategic decision-making, and it's not a replacement for humans. So looking at structured rollout, training in alignment with professional standards. Don't expect AI to be a plug it in and forget it. Unfortunately, adoption is only the beginning, but that's why you've got people like us here to help. And plan for monitoring, validation, and governance.
Yeah, Annie, that's a perfect wrap up. And I guess also transition into our audience question and answer session. So yeah, we're happy, of course, to answer any questions you may have. And while we give everyone a few minutes to drop their questions in the chat, I just wanted to take this opportunity also to remind you all that the evolution of AI in IP report is available to download now on the Clarivate website. And we will also be sure to circulate a direct link to the report after the webinar too, so via email, so you can find out more and go into the details of this report.
All right, thank you both so much. I'm going to dive in with some of our audience questions. So to start, our audience is wondering, how do you determine which IP tasks are best suited for AI versus human review?
Will I take that one, Gloria?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe I'll start. You can add if you feel I've missed anything. So my first thoughts here would be that anything repeatable, anything manual, and anything standardized can be something which AI can be applied to. And that's because it makes it easy for the system to read the data. So if you've got high volume tasks, which are repetitive, say scanning large patent databases, things like docketing, where there's a consistent application number, for example, that can be read, is something that AI can really easily pick up. And it's also the sort of tasks which really take time away from your teams performing more strategic tasks. So I think anything human suited would be more tasks around interpretation, legal reasoning, decision making. So anything low risk and repeatable and standardized is always a great place to start. Anything that needs more strategic thinking and decision making is probably more suited to humans. But Gloria, I'll check with you and see if you agree with me.
Yeah, sure. I think these are all very valid points. I mean, maybe to add a little bit here, again, I think our report really showed that it's not necessarily, AI versus human review. It's a lot about, how can AI complement the human review? And as Annie just mentioned, it can complement in all of these subtasks of a workflow where there is a lot of repetitive, simple tasks, such as, making sense out of some, structured content. So is that, application numbers, expiry dates, deadlines, etc. And also, of course, sorting a lot of data. So sorting a lot of content to, again, accelerate the review process that is still done by the human professional. So I think all the points you made there are, or examples are really fair and valid. And of course, there's a long list of different tasks that we see in different IP processes. but it's really looking at it from a sort of layered perspective on, where this layer of AI technology can, chime in and support sort of that workflow rather than, taking over from that human review. And I think something that is really worth mentioning here as well is that oftentimes we see that this is not necessarily something that needs to be facilitated by AI technologies, but it can also be facilitated by rule-based automation. So, anything that can be written in a script in the background where, you can actually tell the computer, if this happens or if this condition is true, then this should happen. So, you send the email out to this person, or you categorize this data. So, and this is what, sort of these two approaches, I think, will also come in way more in play in the future when we see that, sort of the new kid on the block, which is agentic AI. I don't want to, go too much into that, but when that comes in, where we can support processes in a way more complicated way, even in the next sort of phase of adopting agentic AI. This is where, thinking about, how is that workflow structured? Where does the human oversight come in, and where can a task be sort of taken over by the AI technology? This is really something we see. So, I hope that hopefully that helps with determining sort of which IP tasks, need that human oversight, and, which more of those repetitive tasks that can then be overtaken by the AI technology.
Awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, that's interesting.
So, moving on to our next question. What advice would you give to teams just starting to experiment with AI and IP?
I mean, I think I would go back to what I was saying earlier in the presentation here with what's the objective? So, are you looking for AI just for the sake of having AI, or have you identified a challenge that you're looking to solve? And is the challenge that you want to free up the time for a certain team member or a specific role? Or is the challenge that when you're using your technology, you feel like it's 15 clicks to get to the right place, when you feel like it should be much more simple than this? And I think it's rare to start with the solution and not with the problem. So don't go straight to AI. Think about what the problem is that you're trying to solve, and try to set measurable goals of what it is that you're looking to achieve, so that once you've implemented AI, then you can check if it's actually come out in the way that you were expecting. And you may well find from this that AI wasn't the answer at all, and it was in fact something else altogether. And I think that's why it's always important to start with the challenge instead of the answer. And then I'd probably also say, as I just mentioned in the answer to the previous question, is start with the smaller tasks, the low risk, non-critical tasks as your tests, and see how you get on. And also, you shouldn't have to go out alone. There's many vendors out there, consultants that you can contact, IP communities that you can speak with, that are probably all experiencing very similar challenge to you. Like, whenever we speak to customers, we hear very frequently the same common challenges over and over. So you can speak to a forum, or you can speak to a vendor that gets to speak to multiple customers and get the best advice without going straight to the AI solution, is what my answer would be. But Gloria, you've probably got a more technical perspective that you can add to that as well.
Sure. I think what I often see is in our customer projects is that, and it kind of goes in with what you just said, Annie, but just to maybe bring in some anecdote, I think it's always or often the, when you look at like an IP process map of an organization, it's often that, IP teams come to us and they have this big challenge or issue in one of their processes around the IP lifecycle that they have. And they often think, to tackle it, that challenge is to just, find that, let's say, magic AI solution to overcome their problems. But that's often not the case. So I think, and literally what you also just said, look at the low-hanging fruits in your IP processes where maybe the return of investment doesn't seem, that huge from, just looking at it. It might be just a small return of investment initially, but the efficiency that you might gain whilst having the highest sort of level of confidence that AI can support that process that has already been working actually quite well, will then give that resource in your IP team time to actually challenge to focus on that challenge that is maybe the bigger problem in the process, because we often see that when IP teams have those bigger challenges, it is due to underlying problems with the data, problems with the process itself, problem with, not having enough resource for that, or not the right resource allocated to that task or to that process. And that needs to be fixed first. So this needs to, this is where we see this sort of demand for establishing that readiness for an AI technology first by, cleaning up the data or redesigning the process before then AI can actually come in and, really make this, big improvement on that process. So it just really goes with what you said. Focus on actually not maybe the huge challenges in your current processes, but the medium ones, let's say, and try if you can, have some efficiency gains there quite easily and quickly without too much disruption before then, hopefully enabling you to spend more time on that bigger challenge in your current process map.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for that one. Another question that our audience had asked is, what is the most common misconception you see about using AI in IP workflows?
Well, I think of something that we didn't, not one of the misconceptions that we said in the presentation, because it's not something that we measured in the survey, but it's something that I do see when I speak with customers. And I would say it's really sort of knowing and understanding the difference between AI and automation. So quite often we go straight to AI, and as we said, it can be very confusing to understand the different types and where it fits and where it's possible to embed, and the difference between that and where more simple automation could actually achieve the task that you're looking to, the challenge that you're looking to resolve, sorry. So sort of like an automation would be something that performs predefined rule-based tasks. Like maybe it's something that exists within your IP management system, but you don't know that it's there or you haven't got it switched on. So I think having a really good understanding of what your existing workflow looks like and where there's automation already set up, IPMS is a really good place to start, because the vast majority of IPMS have some kind of automation that can be switched on, whether it's sort of creating a priority case and then it opens up the next patent case for you, or it moves from invention disclosure to priority case, like these sorts of things that can really add up with those little manual tasks of somebody sort of creating a case from scratch, for example. So I think that for me would be quite prevalent. It is like understanding the difference between automation and AI, but also understanding what your sort of status quo is. What does your as is look like, and how are people interacting with the tools like your IPMS or your patent search tools? So I think having that really good assessment of what's actually going on and how far along the sort of digital scale you are at the moment, because you could find some pretty quick wins and things that you could switch on that maybe already exist within the technology that you have without the need to plug in something new or pay for something new.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that's really, I mean, the only thing I might add to that, maybe not so much directed on the workflows themselves, but, sometimes I think what I often hear from customers as well is that, there's a lot of noise on the market at the moment. There's a lot of push for, especially technology-only vendors in the space that, might give you that feeling of, you need to implement AI now for everything. But yeah, to just be able to have, take a step back and just really look at, how much of that is really sensible and responsible, and which one's not. I think this is also, I think this misconception, I think in the general AI hype that we've seen, I think it's now, like we saw in the report, getting a bit more realistic, but just this hype of, we need to have AI for everything now. I think this is, and, other companies are so much far ahead in this. I think this is also a misconception. I think so. No pressure, guys. I think everyone is quite, lost with that topic, and not lost, but there is not one clear answer or one fits all approach for these adoptions, anyways.
Awesome. I think we have time for maybe one more question. I see that there are a few more in the Q&A, so I will forward them to our panelists. Our final question, did you receive any feedback or anecdotes regarding AI hallucinations or issues of trusting generative AI, conclusion results in the context of additional rework, or checking time to be confident about the conclusions of the results?
We definitely did, and I am just going to go straight to my report here, as everything is in the report. And I'm just going to pull up what I think I have quite a good quote directly from this for you. One moment. But I mean, it was definitely a very prevalent subject. And I do believe I've got something that I can share. Not this one. Let me get the next one. Okay. I'm just picking you a nice, good quote here. We definitely have one on hallucinations that's in the survey. Okay, let's go with this. So, okay, this is a direct quote from somebody that answered the survey, and they said, the AI presents significant opportunities in the IP industry, such as streamlining patent searches, automating routine tasks, and improving the accuracy of prior arts analysis. But the advancements can take time, and they can reduce costs and enhance decision-making processes. However, there are risks to consider, including the potential for biased algorithms, the need for transparency in AI decision-making, and challenges in ensuring compliance with evolving regulations. So balancing innovation with responsible implementation will be key to leveraging AI effectively in the IP space. And that's just one quote out of many that we got. Sorry, it took me a while to dig out. There are a few that we've interjected within the report, and that's one that I don't believe is actually in the published version, but I've just got my personal version up here. But it was mentioned many, many times around hallucinations. Yeah, it was a big subject.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. I think that's all the time we have for questions.
Thank you so much, Annie and Gloria, for leading this conversation. Thank you, Clarivate, for sponsoring this accelerator. And my impression, Annie, is that there's a lot more information in the report. And so we do encourage people to download the report. That contact information will again be included in the recording of this accelerator. And if people have more questions about that report, they can contact both of you. Is that correct, Annie and Gloria?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Please do.
Terrific.
Yeah, we will follow up with some of the questions in the chat as well that we did have the time to answer.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time
Thank you.
and expertise. Have a great day.